Welcome back now for our roundtable with our WPTV political analysts, Mary Anna Mancuso and Brian Crowley. Your take as we head into the debate in a few hours. We'll begin with you, Brian, on which candidate among the Democrats there in a new face tonight, Michael Bloomberg, who's plastered Florida with his ads. Your sense, knowing Florida as well as you do, who you think might have the most traction, and I'm not talking just about polling, but as you sense the issues, what are important to voters here, any early thoughts on that?
You know, I think tonight is a big night for Florida Democrats watching Michael Bloomberg. You know, they've already watched the other people debating, and what many folks may not realize is that early voting has already started in this state. So, you know, I think that tonight, especially those Democrats who haven't made up their mind or support a candidate but are willing to look elsewhere, this is Michael Bloomberg's night to sell Florida Democrats.
Mary Anna, the Bloomberg factor, your take tonight.
Well, Bernie Sanders is surging in the polls, but everyone is only talking about Michael Bloomberg, so I'm sure it's sucking some wind out of his sails this evening. But I think it's going to be interesting. This is the first time that we'll see him on the stage, and we'll see that he's actually paying attention to all of the voters, not just Nevada voters, because he's in fact not on the ballot tonight.
Very much we talk about campaigns, and this certainly for the Democrats is the arch progressive wing of the party versus the centrist. Michael Bloomberg trying to fill that role. Amy Klobuchar saying, wait a minute, so is Pete Buttigieg. Joe Biden saying, wait a minute, we're the centrist and we've been here the long haul. But as you look at the makeup of Florida, and you look at that battle, in that sense for Democrats, who do you think, given the history of our state, probably not a name of a candidate, but in terms of centrism or progressivism, which message sells more, do you think, in Florida?
Well, I think Florida trends mostly toward the middle. I think, especially among Democrats. I don't think, is there a segment of hardcore Bernie Sanders voters? Sure. But I think overall, when you're looking to win in this state, you know, they tend to lean towards the centrist Democrat.
We want to ask you two about some issues. Let's put up our poll if we can. We went on Facebook, unscientific poll, but we asked viewers via Facebook and Twitter what issues matter the most. And here's what the poll revealed: healthcare, economy, gun policy, immigration, education. And we looked at those, and healthcare came out on top. Not surprising. We've seen that in national trends and here as well. And tonight, our viewers, those of you watching this, are going to hear a very fierce debate, no doubt, about Medicare for all and eliminating eventually private health care insurance, the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren prescription, or the more centrist point of view. It's going to be very interesting to me, Michael Bloomberg in that centrist camp, all of them elbowing for room and space on who can carry that message to the finish line, Mary Anna.
It's going to be interesting. Bernie Sanders has touted his health care bill almost every single debate by reminding us that he wrote the damn bill. And Elizabeth Warren has also signed on to that bill, but she has her own plan for health care. Meanwhile, it'll be interesting to see where Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and Michael Bloomberg fall when it comes to health care, especially Michael Bloomberg. All eyes are on him tonight, as I've mentioned, because we have no idea how he's going to perform or what he has ready for.
You know, you bring up a good point. $400 million in, a lot of that spent in Florida. He's skipping the first several races. He wasn't in Iowa, wasn't in New Hampshire, not Nevada, South Carolina, Super Tuesday, and then on to Florida, March 17th. Bloomberg will be all in, but tonight could be make or break for him as much as for other people on that stage, whether he exceeds expectations or falls flat on his face, Brian. It's going to be interesting political theater.
I think for Florida Democrats, he can do okay, he can do great, but he can't do badly. You know, he can survive okay, but I think if he just like falls on his face tonight, I think Florida Democrats will stick with the people they already like.
He'll be hammered on stop and frisk in New York as a crime-fighting tool. He's apologized for it. He'll be hammered on alleged sexist comments over the course of his career. Your take?
Let me also add that, you know, there are a lot of folks who, especially among South Florida Democrats, who happen to hail from New York. So a lot of these folks, they know New York, they know the mayor, they have some sense of him. So he's not a stranger, at least a certain segment of South Florida Democrats.
We talk the Joe Biden campaign. You would think Barack Obama wins the state twice. He's ridden his coattails at every stop, talks about the fact of what they accomplished, and yet many people are saying, can he resuscitate and revive the campaign, whether it's Nevada, South Carolina, on to Super Tuesday in Florida for Joe Biden?
You know, I think Joe Biden's in a lot of trouble. I think, you know, where Jeb Bush had his please clap moment as his campaign was falling apart, I think Joe Biden's on the verge of having his please clap moment. It looks really tough for Joe Biden unless he does something really remarkable tonight.
Mary Anna, Florida is not until March 17th, Super Tuesday. About 40% of the Democratic delegates will be allotted, but we're such a big battleground state. Talk about wherever we are on the calendar, mid-March for Florida, the importance of Florida.
Florida is always important, first and foremost, because we like to remind America that we know how to vote, and we will be voting on March 17th. And we also have 219 delegates to allocate. And so I think when we look to the primary, we look at March, you know, as Brian said, Joe Biden's campaign is in a lot of trouble. It's treading water right now. So is Elizabeth Warren. They both did very poorly in Iowa and New Hampshire. And if they make it to Florida, that will be, I think, a godsend for their campaigns, because it's going to be very difficult. And Florida Democrats are looking for somebody who will not be, you know, so far necessarily hardcore progressive. I think that Bernie Sanders is going to have a lot of difficulty here in Florida, but they would have a chance to opt for candidates like Joe Biden, whereas Brian said, Bloomberg could have a great opportunity.
But you need wind in your sails to get here and to make that a success. Michael Bloomberg, hoping with his hundreds of millions already spent in Florida, you have not been able to escape a television set or a social media outlet without seeing Michael Bloomberg. Tonight,
we should note for fun that Michael Bloomberg has a home in Wellington,
yeah,
because his daughter is equestrian. So.
There you go. Final thoughts as we look at the shape of the race where we stand now. It's winnowing. Some argue we're going to see the field winnow more now. Final thoughts for our viewers on what you want them to look for tonight, to listen for in this debate, and with kind of the Florida-centric spin to all of that, right?
Well, I think this is the night where, the previous debates was mostly talking about policy with the occasional little jab at each other. I think tonight's going to be a lot more jabbing and a little less debate. I think people are going to be challenging each other really fiercely tonight, and I think we want to see who comes out of that well and is able to hold their head up when all's said and done, but don't get so ugly that they seem like they sound like Trump.
I asked our guest, Democrats, many in the Democratic establishment worry that Bernie Sanders, leading in national polls, will not be able to carry them against the finish line against President Donald Trump should he be nominated. Republicans, who do you think, Mary Anna, they worry about most at night?
Who are Republicans worried about?
Yeah.
Probably Michael Bloomberg. That man could outspend Trump and not even bat an eyelash, right? But also we have to look at the candidates that have that ability to move to the center to woo the MPAs.
We will have final comments from both of our expert analysts who will be strapped in all year long as we head toward November, and we'll be back with more in a moment. Now time for closing comments, the Mancuso moment.
Well, in tonight's debate, I'll be paying attention to Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar to see how they work to close the gap of Latino and African-American voters heading into Nevada, because it's a far more diverse state than we've seen in Iowa and New Hampshire.
The Crowley closer.
Well, I think what the Democratic Party needs to remember as we move along in this process is that Florida is always a key state. Florida is always very, very close. So they need to, if they want to win Florida, pick a Democratic nominee who can win in a fairly moderate Democratic state, and they need to be very aggressive about it, and it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight.
In a state that's flipped back and forth, as purple as you get when it comes to politics in November. And you two will be with us every step of the way, and we thank you both very much for that. Of course, we thank you for watching this special edition of To The Point. Please stay tuned for the NBC News Democratic presidential debate at 9 p.m. right here on WPTV News Channel 5. As always, wishing you and yours a great evening and a great week.